Have you ever picked up a t-shirt you've loved for years and stood there wondering why it suddenly feels all wrong? My friends, you are not alone in that moment. Today I'm sharing 7 specific ways to style a t-shirt after 60. And most women are missing at least 5 of them. Tip number 5 in particular. This one genuinely surprised me when I first discovered it, because it goes against almost everything we've been told about how to dress after 60. The truth is, it's usually not you. It's how these shirts are actually engineered. And once you understand that, you'll see your closet completely differently. Now, I know you've probably watched t-shirt styling videos before, and I know they often feel like they were made for someone else's body, someone younger or slimmer, or just different from yours. What I'm sharing today is different. It starts with understanding why a t-shirt isn't working, not just what to do about it. And every single adjustment I'll show you works across different bodies. Whether you're petite, whether you carry weight in your midsection, whether your figure has shifted in ways you're still getting used to, I'll tell you exactly how to adapt each one for yours. I want to tell you about a moment I had a few years ago. I was standing in front of my mirror, holding a simple white t-shirt, a shirt I'd owned and loved for years, and something felt off. I couldn't name it. I just knew something wasn't working. I'll come back to that moment before we finish today, because what I eventually understood changed everything for me. Here's what I've discovered. There is one specific optical principle that runs through almost every single adjustment I'm about to show you. Once you truly see it, and you will, by the time we get to tip 5, you'll have a tool that works far beyond t-shirts. But before we get to the adjustments themselves, there's something worth understanding first, because when you know why a t-shirt stops working, the fixes make complete sense. Here's what no one in fashion has ever bothered to explain. The t-shirts you find in every store, every price point, every brand, were designed for a 25-year-old body. Not yours, not mine. A body with a higher neckline, a narrower shoulder drop, and a torso that sits differently from ours at 60, 70, or 80. Think about the neckline on a standard crew neck t-shirt. It sits high and straight across the collarbone, drawing a clean horizontal line right across the base of the neck. On a younger body, that line frames well. On a mature body, where the neck has naturally lengthened and the shoulders have evolved, that same horizontal closes everything off. It shortens the neck, it narrows the face, it pulls the eye down and across, away from your face and toward your midsection. That's not your fault. That's engineering. And here's what no one talks about alongside that. After 60, our bodies evolve. The shoulders carry a softer curve. The torso redistributes itself. Posture shifts, not dramatically, but enough that how fabric falls against our body genuinely changes. And this is not a problem to be fixed. It's simply a new reality that deserves a smarter approach. The industry never updated the t-shirt for us. It kept the same sleeve drop angle, the same hemline proportion, the same everything, while we kept living and changing and growing. So the gap between the garment and our bodies widened, and we started standing in front of mirrors wondering what we'd done wrong. Nothing. We did nothing wrong. So, what do we do with that? The answer sits in something simple. The eye follows lines. That's it. Every visual decision we make with clothing, the neckline shape, where a sleeve ends, how a hem sits, creates a line, and our eye follows that line somewhere, up toward the face, across the body, down toward the floor. When we understand which lines to create, we stop being at the mercy of how a shirt was engineered. We get to decide where the eye goes. That's exactly what these 7 adjustments are built on. Not tricks, not rules, a single principle, applied 7 different ways. And as we work through each one, you'll start to see it everywhere. So let's put it to work. Starting with the adjustment that takes 3 seconds and changes everything your closet produces from today forward. Tip 1. The neckline frame. The neckline is the single most powerful face-framing element on any t-shirt. And it's also the one most women never think to change. Here's why this matters. A crew neck draws a straight horizontal line right across the base of your neck. We already know the eye follows lines, and a horizontal pulls the eye across and outward, away from your face, toward the widest part of your chest. A V-neck or scoop changes that completely. It creates a line that points upward, directly toward your face. That's the only difference, one direction versus another. And the result is that every person who looks at you sees your face first. Go through your t-shirts right now, in your mind or literally when you finish watching. Look for any V-neck or scoop neck you already own. The V doesn't need to be dramatic. Even a modest 2-inch opening creates the upward direction. That's enough. Now, if you have a fuller chest or carry more volume across your upper body, you don't need a deep V at all. A shallow V or a soft scoop works just as beautifully. Even 2 or 3 inches of opening is enough to redirect the eye upward. You're not going for dramatic, you're going for direction. And if you have a straighter silhouette or a flatter chest, a slightly deeper V or a boat neck that angles gently will give you the same upward draw. The principle doesn't change, only the depth. But the neckline is just the beginning. The next adjustment takes 30 seconds, and it does something the neckline alone can't. It creates a waistline where you didn't have one before. Tip 2. The intentional tuck. Now, I want to address something directly. If you've ever been told to tie a knot in your t-shirt, please don't. It damages the fabric, it shifts within an hour, and honestly, on us, it just doesn't look right. The intentional tuck does everything a knot claims to do, and it takes 10 seconds. Here's the science. An untucked t-shirt creates one long hemline that goes straight across your body, horizontal. We've established what a horizontal does. It measures your width at its widest point. When you tuck even a small portion at the front, just the center, 3 or 4 inches, you break that horizontal. You create a diagonal instead, and your brain reads a diagonal as height, as definition, as intentional. That diagonal, that's the optical principle I mentioned, the one that runs through every tip in this video. You've just created it with your own hands, in 10 seconds. To do it, hold the front center of your t-shirt, not the sides, just the center, and tuck 3 to 4 inches into your waistband. Leave everything else completely free. Smooth it once, done. Now, and this is the modification I most want you to hear, if you carry weight in your midsection, tucking at the front can feel like it draws the eye straight there. Your modification is this: tuck at the side instead. One side, the diagonal line you create is identical. The benefit is the same, but the eye travels toward your hip line, not your center. All the height, none of the self-consciousness. If you're petite, keep the tuck very small. Even 1 inch is enough. On a shorter torso, a large tuck can eat into the visual length you're working to create. Subtle is the word. Subtle is the result. Those 2 tips work on the shirt itself. The third one adds something to it, and it's the one that makes even a plain crew neck t-shirt look completely polished. Tip 3. The third piece rule. If there is one thing I want you to take from this entire video, even if you forget everything else, let it be this, because this single habit changes how a t-shirt reads more than anything else you could do. Here's why it works. When you wear a t-shirt on its own, your silhouette has one unbroken outline. The eye moves around it, looking for definition, and if there's none, it settles wherever the fabric is widest. When you add an open layer, a cardigan, a linen button-down, a lightweight blazer, and you wear it open, not buttoned, something structural happens. The front edges of that layer create 2 vertical lines running from your shoulders all the way to the hem, 2 columns of fabric running straight down on either side of your body. Architects use vertical lines to make buildings appear taller. Your eye does the same with your body. It travels up and down those columns instead of side to side. The silhouette reads as longer, more defined, more intentional. Choose any open layer from your wardrobe. A cardigan you already own, a linen shirt, a blazer, a longer vest. Wear it open, fully open, not buttoned. That's the entire instruction. The open edges do the work. If you're fuller figured and want to minimize width, choose a layer that falls at or below the hip, rather than ending above it. A longer open cardigan or duster creates the longest possible vertical columns, which gives you the most elongation. And pairing a slightly darker layer over a lighter t-shirt deepens the framing effect even further. If you're petite, keep the layer short. A cropped cardigan or an open blazer that ends at the natural waist gives you the vertical framing without adding visual length you don't need. The columns still do their job. They just run for a shorter distance. 3 tips. 3 principles applied to shirts you already own. And you can use any one of them today, right now, before you close this video. But tips 4 through 7 are where it gets genuinely interesting. And tip number 5, the one I mentioned right at the start, the one that surprised me. We're almost there. Before we get there, can I pause with you for just a moment? Because something happens when you stop seeing tips as rules and start seeing them as principles you actually understand. It's different from watching a list video. You're not just collecting instructions, you're building a way of seeing. That shift matters, and I want to make sure you feel it before we continue. My friends, so many women over 60 have spent years watching styling content that simply wasn't made for their body. Tips demonstrated on slim figures. Modifications never mentioned. The message, even if unintentional, you'll have to figure out the rest yourself. That's not what this is. Every single adjustment in this video was built with your body in mind, not as an afterthought. From the first tip, I'd love to know which of the first 3 tips you're most excited to try. Drop it in the comments as we go. And tip number 5 is one more tip away. That mirror story I promised. I haven't forgotten. All right, my friends, let's get to tips 4 through 7, and the one that changes everything. Tip 4, the sleeve reveal. And this one introduces something we haven't talked about yet, where a line stops, not just where it points. We've talked about where lines point. This tip is about something different, where they stop, because the eye doesn't just follow a line, it stops at the end of one, and that stopping point becomes the measurement. Think of a sleeve like a bracket. A bracket opens and closes. Where it closes is where your eye registers the width of your arm. A cap sleeve closes at the widest part of the upper arm, so that width becomes the anchor. A short sleeve that ends just below the bicep moves the closing point to a narrower spot. A 3/4 sleeve closes where the forearm naturally narrows, the slimmest anchor of all. Same arm, 3 different measurements, depending entirely on where the bracket closes. Look at your t-shirts in a mirror. Notice where each sleeve ends on your arm, and ask, is that the narrowest point available or the widest? If you love the look of short sleeves, find the style that ends just below the widest point of your bicep, not at it. And if you want the most universally flattering option after 60, 3/4 is it. If your upper arms are fuller, and this tip is especially valuable for you right now, if your sleeve ends at the widest point of your arm, that measurement becomes the visual anchor for your entire upper body. Shift the closing point down, just past the elbow. The anchor moves to a narrower place, and your whole arm reads differently. If you love your arms and want to show them, a clean shoulder line as the closing point works beautifully. The shoulder is always a strong anchor. And here's something worth noting. That bracket principle, the idea that where something ends determines what your eye measures, is the closest we've gotten to naming the principle I've been building toward. Tip 5 names it fully. I told you at the beginning that this one surprised me, that it goes against almost everything we've been told about dressing after 60. Here it is. We've always been told that darker colors are more slimming. And that's true for your lower body. But there's something that advice never addresses. When you put dark colors near your face, you pull the eye away from it, down and away. And your face is your greatest feature. It deserves the light, the color value rule. Here's the science, and here's the principle I've been building toward since the beginning of this video. In visual perception, lighter colors advance. They come forward. Darker colors recede, they move away. A lighter t-shirt near your face draws every gaze upward and forward, toward your eyes, your expression, your presence. Pair it with darker trousers or a darker skirt below, and you've created a visual direction. Look up, look here, look at her. This is it. The eye follows lines. Light draws attention forward. Vertical lines create height. Diagonal lines create waist definition. Every tip in this video, every single one, is built on those three truths. You now have a framework, not a list of rules, a way of seeing that works for every piece of clothing you will ever wear. In practical terms, reach for t-shirts in lighter tones. White, cream, soft blush, warm ivory, light gray. Pair them with darker trousers, jeans, or skirts below. Navy, black, deep olive, charcoal. The contrast does the work, and this applies regardless of your style, your season, or your budget. For deeper skin tones, lighter doesn't mean pale or white. It means lighter in value than what you wear below. Warm ivory, golden yellow, soft terracotta, blush rose. Any color brighter than your lower half creates the same upward direction. The principle is about contrast, not specific shades, and if dark tops are simply part of who you are, don't give them up. Create the light zone near your face a different way. A pearl necklace, a light scarf draped at the collar, a lighter toned open layer. You're not breaking the rule, you're applying the principle. Tip 6 shifts from color to touch. Specifically, how the fabric you choose behaves against a body that has changed. Tip 6. The fabric intelligence. We've covered line direction, anchor points, color value. All of it visual, all of it about how the eye reads what it sees. This tip is different. It's about what the body feels, and how that feeling changes everything the eye sees. After 60, posture shifts. The shoulders carry a softer curve. There may be a slight forward lean. We talked about this. It's simply how bodies evolve. And stiff fabric, heavy cotton, structured peak, thick jersey, doesn't care. It holds its own shape. So when your posture shifts slightly, the stiff fabric holds the shape of that shift. You see the angles, you see the folds. The fabric shows you the fight. Fluid fabric is different. Modal, viscose, soft bamboo jersey, cotton modal blends. These move with your body. Where your body softens, the fabric softens. Where you shift, it follows. The garment disappears into elegance rather than announcing itself. The test is simple. Pick up a t-shirt and scrunch a handful of the fabric. Release it. Does it spring back smoothly or hold the crumple? Smooth release means fluid. It drapes. Held crumple means stiff. It fights. Look for modal, viscose, or cotton modal blends. A fluid t-shirt at $20 does more for you than a stiff one at $80. For fuller figures, fluid fabric is especially significant. Stiff fabric pulls and creates friction lines across the body. Fluid fabric drapes around it. Look for fabrics with at least 5% elastane. Stretch gives you ease and movement together. Structured but fluid fabrics like ponte or stretch jersey offer definition without stiffness. If you're leaner and want more structure without stiffness, matte jersey with minimal stretch gives you movement and shape together. Avoid very clingy fabrics if you want the drape without the reveal. And tip 7 is the last one. And it's about proportion, in a way that might make you look at every t-shirt you own completely differently. We talked about sleeve brackets, where something ends determines what the eye measures. The same principle applies to your hemline. And most t-shirts land at exactly the wrong place. A t-shirt hemline that ends at the widest point of your hip divides your body at its broadest measurement. That's the number your eye registers, the broadest point, as the defining proportion of your whole silhouette. Move the hemline 2 inches above that point, or 2 inches below it, past the hip entirely, and the measurement changes. Your eye lands on a narrower place. The proportion shifts. The silhouette reads taller. This is the fastest visual height adjustment in styling, and it requires no purchase, no alteration, and no new shirt. Stand in front of a mirror and find the widest point of your hip. Then check where your t-shirt hemline falls. If it's landing exactly there, try tucking it slightly, or look for a slightly shorter or longer version of what you already love. Both directions are better than the middle. If your hips are fuller, a hemline that clears the widest point entirely, falling just below it, creates a cleaner proportion line. The third piece from tip 3, worn open and long, reinforces this further with vertical framing on either side. If you're petite, shorter is almost always better. A hemline that ends at or above the hip gives you the longest possible leg line. Use the half tuck from tip 2 if the shirt runs long. 7 tips, 7 applications of the same framework. How the eye reads lines, how light draws attention, how proportion tells its story. You have it now. And before we finish, I still owe you that mirror story. Something shifted for you today. Not in the shirts, in how you see them. You walked in with a t-shirt that felt wrong and no idea why. You're leaving with a framework that explains not just t-shirts, but every single piece of clothing you'll ever choose. That belongs to you now. That doesn't go away. That mirror moment I promised you. I was standing there holding a white t-shirt I'd had for years. Something felt off. I kept looking at the shirt, trying to find what was wrong with it. Trying to find what was wrong with me. What I eventually understood, and what took me far too long to learn, is that I was looking for the wrong things. I was looking for flaws. I should have been looking for lines. Once I started asking, where is this directing the eye, instead of, does this look right? Everything changed. The shirt didn't change. The mirror didn't change. I did. That's what I wanted to give you today. Not a list of tips, a different way of looking. Before you go, I have one question for you. Of these 7 adjustments, the neckline frame, the intentional tuck, the third piece, the sleeve reveal, the color value rule, the fabric intelligence, and the proportion equation, which one are you most excited to try first? Drop your answer in the comments, because when you tell me which one resonates, it tells me exactly what to go deeper on for you next. This community shapes what gets made here. I read every single comment. I'd love to hear which one you're starting with. Style doesn't stop at 60. It only gets more intentional. And if you want to apply this same framework to jeans, because there are 2 ways women over 60 are wearing them that quietly work against the whole silhouette. That video is right here.